To our session on OpenET. I'm delighted to have you here. OpenET is a web accessible platform that puts satellite-based data on evapotranspiration in the hands of everyone to advance collaboration and climate resilience. My name is Maurice Hall, and I lead Environmental Defense Fund's Climate Resilient Water Systems Program. And Environmental Defense Fund is an environmental nonprofit that works in 28 countries and has more than 3 million members. Now, this is my first time at World Water Week. And in fact, it's the first time for all the participants in our panel here today. We're really excited to be here in Stockholm to share with you OpenET, something that we've been putting a lot of work into for the last 6 years. Now, this is especially exciting for me as a water resource engineer. For the past 30 years, practically every problem that I've dealt with, I've run into the need for good information about evapotranspiration, one of the largest components of the water budget in most places. And frankly, in many cases, we had to guess. Sometimes we got information, but it was very expensive. But now, because of the work of this team and a number of people behind them, OpenET is providing that data day in and day out for 17 Western states in the United States. OpenET is up and running, and we have a number of end users on our panel today that will share with you how they are using the data. But before we get to those end users, we want to provide you with a brief introduction of OpenET and show you how it works. So I want to introduce to you Robin Grimm, who is leading the new OpenET organization. And she will be followed by Gabriel Sanay from the US Geological Survey, one of the leading experts in satellite-based ET measurement, to tell you more.
Okay, hopefully this is working. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Maurice, and hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for spending some time with us this morning. Really excited to have you here and to have this amazing panel to talk a little bit more with us today about how they're using OpenET. It's probably no secret to any of you in this room that the world in general is facing increasing challenges around drought and scarcity. I'm from California. We're all from the US on this panel in this room, or most of us are. And according to the United States Drought Monitor, nearly 50% of the contiguous United States is currently facing drought and scarcity. And unfortunately, as shown in this map here, the United States is hardly alone. Many parts of the world are facing scarcity for at least 10 months out of the year. And it's anticipated that half the world's population could actually be living in areas facing scarcity by 2025. And as drought becomes more common, farmers and water managers are having to figure out how to sustain communities, sustain ecosystems, and continue to grow the food that we all eat with just a fraction of the water that was available before. Now imagine trying to manage a resource as precisely and carefully as we need to without, as Maurice alluded to, consistent and timely data on the amount of water that crops and other vegetation actually consume and use as they grow. It's somewhat surprising that that's actually been the case across the globe for many years now. So today we're going to talk about OpenET and how it was developed and came in and is helping to start to fill this huge data gap for water management starting in the Western US. OpenET is an online water data platform that provides field scale evapotranspiration data across 17 states in the Western US. You're going to see a little demo of the platform in a little while, but I first want to talk a little bit more about what evapotranspiration is and why it matters. The ET in OpenET stands for evapotranspiration, and that's the process by which water evaporates from the land surface and transpires from plants. It's the first and second bullets there on the slide in front of you. ET represents the second largest component of the water cycle, and it can be thought of as the opposite of precipitation, right? It's water that's leaving the land surface and returning back up to the atmosphere. And as such, it's a measure of the portion of the water that once applied to the landscape is no longer available for reuse. It's also a key measure for farmers of the amount of water that needs to be replaced through irrigation or precipitation in order to ensure a healthy crop with maximum yields. We like to say managing water without understanding ET then is kind of like trying to manage a household budget without really knowing how much you're spending day in and day out. OpenET has made this critical water consumption data widely available down to the field scale. This opens the door to many new water management strategies that just wouldn't otherwise be possible at that kind of scale. OpenET can help rural communities design locally driven water conservation and trading programs. Water managers can use OpenET to develop more accurate water budgets and incentive programs. OpenET can also be used by policymakers to more accurately track water supplies at larger scales, simplify regulatory compliance, and co-develop solutions with local communities that are based on a common starting understanding of water use on the ground. And finally, farmers can use OpenET data to improve irrigation practices and reduce costs for fertilizer, water, and energy. We're so lucky to be joined by a lot of the users of OpenET today that can talk more about all of these uses of the platform. But first, we're going to be talking a little bit more about how this works and again, showing that demo. So I'm very pleased now to introduce Gabriel Sanay, a research scientist and OpenET partner from the US Geological Survey, to explain a little bit more about how OpenET actually works.
Thank you, Robin. Pleased to be here. So what you've seen here is the public-private partnerships, which is very key for the success of OpenET. There is 3 federal agencies, as you can see, NASA, USDA, and USGS, working with several universities and private partners. That's what makes it a successful partnership. This group, they're behind, in each of them, probably 1 or 2 or 3 members. So you can imagine how many people are participating. They work as one unit, and they share ideas, they share technology, skills, and to produce a very useful and accurate products. Next, please. And here, before we do a demo, I just want to explain how we estimate ET from space. There are 2 panels in here. On the left side, you see satellite data. So you need data source from satellite. On the right side, these kids playing with sprinklers, actually, they're using practical knowledge of heat transfer and evaporative cooling. So how about when you don't have that feeling? Well, we have equations. So scientists, engineers have developed energy balance equations that turn these feelings into estimation of evapotranspiration. So satellites provide that data. In what way? Well, they give you how green the vegetation is, so which means use more water, or how the land surface is cool or dry. So the difference in temperature is huge. When it's very dry, the temperature could be as high as 25 degrees centigrade or 45 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than a well-watered cool surface, which is evapotranspiring to the maximum. So that's really the key. You need satellite data, combined with some weather data, and a physics energy balance systems. Next, please. So how good is our product? Well, we have to validate the product using independent data. You can always create impressive satellite images, but you still have to ground truth and validate. So OpenET took a lot of energy and resources to test, evaluate probably the largest ever model intercomparison work, 6 models using more than 140 stations called flux towers, eddy covariance data, very expensive. And the results have been very good and published in the Journal of the American Water Resources Association. So before then, it's time for a demo. And I would like to introduce my colleague, Alberto Guzman, who is a senior software engineer at NASA and from California State, Monterey Bay, who helped build OpenET and will give you a brief demo. Alberto.
Thank you, Gabriel. So I'm going to start out at the OpenET page. As you can see here, if you look at the top right corner, we have a lot of methodologies, a lot of explanations on how the models work. But the thing I'm going to focus on is the Data Explorer. So if you go to the Data Explorer button and you click it, first you'll be greeted by a page where you can create your free OpenET account. After you create your account, you'll be able to sign into the map. You can see that the map has a lot of layers and controls for the data.
I'm going to start at the top. So if you look at the top, you have your year selection, your variable selection. There you go. And your view selector. No? Does that work? All right, the light wasn't good for me, so. Then if we move down to the map, you have where you can toggle the units and the opacity of the layers and where you can zoom in and out. Okay, so I'm gonna use the view toggle to change from the field boundaries to the gridded data. And then I'm gonna change the year from 2022 to 2017. And as you can see, I'm gonna toggle back and forth. You can see that the spatial patterns change. So now that we got a look of the high level overview of the map, I'm gonna zoom into an area in northern Colorado and go back to the field view. So as OpenET has 4.4 million polygons with pre-computed data. And I'm gonna show you how they line up with the base layer of the Google Maps, the imagery. As you can see if you go to any of those fields, if you hover over it, you're gonna see on the top right corner a time series of that data. If you click the field, you're gonna get a time series of the last 5 years of data. If you look at the right side, you can select any of the 6 OpenET models plus the ensemble average and the range. If you look at 2017, it looks different than other years. This is because this particular field participated in a volunteer program to follow their land for that year, 2017 through early 2018. Before, this would have taken a long time, but because we have OpenET and we could compare the different models, you can clearly see it here. We have the monthly data, but also we have cumulative option where it's even easier to see that 2017, that year was different. So now we go back to the raster view where you can see the gridded data and see how the ET data plays out over the landscape. Here you can also click on any point to get a time series like before, but this with the pixel level, you get more options. You get daily data like so. Another thing, if let's say you didn't want just a pixel, or you didn't want a predefined field, that you wanted to create your own shape. So if you go to the bottom right corner, you have the draw custom area button. If we click that, you're taken to some tools that we have to create your own field. So the top right corner has where either you can create a box or specify the vertices of your polygon. So that's what I did here. And then when I complete that polygon, I get after a few seconds, I get a time series of the shape that I specify. So you might be wondering, can I get access to the backend, to the tools that were used to create this amazing website? The answer is yes. So later in the year, we're going to be releasing a public API or applications. So yeah, there are more tools that the API is going to provide. So if you have any questions, just let me know. I'm going to hand it back to Maurice so he can introduce the panel.
Thank you very much, Alberto. Now, Alberto and Gabriel are part of a team of more than 30 people who have built this platform. Just as important are the users. And so we do have a panel of users who you can come up and take your seat, who are going to share with you how they are using OpenET data. Here, Mark, I think you're first. We'll have a chance to answer some questions. So joining us today are a number of users that I mentioned. And at first, I think we're going to start with Mark Owens. Mark is an alfalfa farmer in the US state of Oregon. And he's also serving his first term as an elected representative in the Oregon State Legislature. And Mark, we thought we should start with you because as a farmer, you're experiencing the effects firsthand of water scarcity in Eastern Oregon. And as an elected official, you're representing farmers too. Can you tell us a little of your personal experience using OpenET and how you've used it to reduce applied water and how it's informing your work on the farm, and then more regionally, even your statewide scale as a politician? Oh, yes.
Stand by for commercial, please.
We have a video that shows you first a little closer hand where Mark is coming from in Eastern Oregon.
We're under a drought in most of the West contiguously. The climate is changing. Summers are getting longer, it's getting hotter, it's getting drier, we're getting less precipitation. So I think there's a growing awareness in all of the West that we have to use significantly less water. So agriculture has to figure out how to get as much per drop of water as they can. I started to try to understand evapotranspiration when we collectively started trying to figure out, can I put less water on my fields and still yield the same amount or more? I go online and I can pull up the evapotranspiration numbers. I compare the amount of water that I apply daily, weekly, probably monthly, compared to what OpenET says. And I can see if I'm over applying or under applying. So if I put on more water than evapotranspiration I already have in my bank, I can shut off for a couple of days. That means we could use about 25% less water and still produce the same amount of crop, which means a lot if you're putting out several million gallons of water a day.
Go for it, Mark.
I'm going to stand a little bit just because I feel better. So good morning. Welcome to Stockholm. I hope your journey was good. Ours was a little interesting. At 1:30 this morning, I wasn't sure if we were going to be here. I'm not sure why Maurice would want to start with a politician because I'm supposed to limit myself to 5 minutes. But that being said, I must start with my adventure or journey into water and how I became a farmer that used OpenET and a policymaker that wants to support it. So in May 2026, the Water Resource Department of Oregon came into my basin in Southeast Oregon, said, hey, we might have made a mistake. We might have overappropriated your basin. They showed us a blue bar graph. On that blue bar graph, it showed from 1968 Robinson study, the amount of recharge that comes into our basin, about 270,000 acre feet. Of that, about 89,200 acre feet are used for springs and streams, leaving a remainder of approximately 170,000 acre feet. They had appropriated at that time around 270,000 acre feet. So I asked myself why. It frustrated me, made me concerned. How could this happen? It must be a one-off. Must have only happened in the Harney Basin in Southeast Oregon. These were rural, only have a couple thousand people. They weren't paying attention. The more I looked, the more I realized, hey, that's not true. It happened in Oregon before, continued to happen in Oregon. It's happening across the rest of the 17 Western states, and probably in a community or basin or region of yours. So that started, I guess, a progression in my life. I was a first-generation farmer. I never left a farm, but I actually got kind of pissed off. What can we do about this? So it took myself and manifested itself in two different directions. How can we stop this from happening at the state level? And how can we work with communities like myself and mine to figure out how we can get sustainable? So my goal right now is to make sure every basin in Oregon can understand their water balance overlaid with what's been appropriated. The biggest data gap that we found was actually consumptive use. not going off paper water, because we all know that's just as good as the paper it's written on. What is actually being used? And that's where OpenET comes in. OpenET can help create those water balances and budgets in real time. In Oregon, water is a public resource managed by the state. But if it's a public resource, shouldn't the public know how we're using that water, what we're applying? I say yes. So in 2021, as a state representative, we took forward a package that I championed in order to make the Water Resource Department in the state of Oregon team up with USGS and come up with those water balances and those water budgets, and actually show with OpenET historical record of what has been used and what is currently being used, so the public can understand that water balance and budget, and so can the agriculture community, so we can start to figure out how we can manage the water better. So that'll be the first. We're just actually starting that. They started sending the contract to USGS, and we're going to start working through that. So that's a good thing. So that's how we'll figure out how we can stop the, lack of a better term, the blood flow. These people know that we are bleeding out in the 17 Western states, and that blood is water. Now, personally, what does that mean to my community? What does that mean to me as a farmer? So also in 2015, we started a water collaborative. As the state said they would start to do a more comprehensive groundwater study, we started discussing, because it was clear and evident that we had to use less water and we were over appropriated. So what can we do about that? So we started working with many host of solutions on how we can use less water as an agricultural community. And a lot of those are going to rely on open evapotranspiration. One of them will be a water market share, a declining share program that we start out with a basis and we start reducing as we go through a period of time. There's a lot of water regulation and policy in Oregon, but there's not a lot of accountability or tools in order for the public to understand. So as an agriculture community, when I come forward and I ask for flexibility in how to use water, there should be an expectation. They'll also be transparent that we're meeting those needs, the desires, and actually reducing what we're due. That's where OpenET comes in. So OpenET can look at my farms, my fields, and if I say I'm going to use 3% less water that year on a declining share, everybody should be able to know. They should be able to look back on a period of record and say, hey, he's meeting his goal. So it's going to be very important in a water market. Also, we're looking at a conservation reserve enhancement program for groundwater. There's been a couple successful in the Western states, one in Colorado or two in Colorado and others. So if we're going to use public money to dry up water, a match between federal and state, once again, we got to be transparent. We got to make sure that if we're doing a water market or a CREP program, excuse me, that we're actually drying the water up. How can we do that now? We can do that with OpenET. So if we're using a public resource, the public should have the ability to see the information of the water that's not being applied. So it'd be a voluntary cancellation of a water rate. What does it mean to my own water management on my own farm? So the groundwater study that I talked about just got published in April of this year, and it shows that in our basin, there were about 110,000 acre feet over appropriated. We only use about 135 to 145,000 acre feet of groundwater in the basin. It's a closed basin. There's no access to any rivers. We're in the dry part of Southeast Oregon, 8 to 10 inches of rainfall, 4,200 foot. There's no Columbia River that we're going to tap into. There's no dam that we're going to put in. Not saying that we should, but we're going to have to figure out how to become sustainable. So with evapotranspiration, we've designed sprinkler system using low elevation spray applications where we reduced our water use by 20%. We've reduced our power use by 25%. We started to figure out how to do more with less. Conservation through efficiencies without reduction of yield. That's the first step. We work with the agricultural community to design systems to match the water that we need. So every Monday, I get together with my 7 and 9 employees. We have 2 people that are in charge of irrigation. We do about 4,000 acres. We actually look at OpenET. We look at they have a draft or a beta that actually will forecast OpenET for the next 7 days in my area. So we look at what the water crop demand is going to be. We know what we're applying, and we talk. How many days can we irrigate this week? How many days should we irrigate this week? And we'll actually shut down for 1 or 2 days, because most of the time an irrigation system is designed for peak evapotranspiration in the summer. So the areas where you can really start to reduce is during crop scheduling or when it's cooler in the spring and fall. So we go through that exercise every Monday to figure out how we're going to use less water. And we start talking about different crops, different things. So it's an evolving education process in our community and how we do it. So I represent farmers and ranchers. I represent 37% of the southeast corner of the state. It's mostly ag. This does make ag nervous, folks. It does. We have to have some grace with our agriculture community to work through this. We need to make sure that we ground truth it with more eddy covariance stations. We got to make sure there's a common understanding that the information here is accurate. I'm there. One of those flux towers was in one of my alfalfa pivots. But some of my other agricultural people across the western states, it's not there. But I'll also share with you, I believe the vast majority, way up in the upper 90s of farmers and ranchers use water within their rate and duty. They do. And I tell them, if you do that, let's show that to the public. Let's make sure people understand that OpenET can do that. I say, if you're not, stop. We're not going to have any tolerance for those that are using more than what they have. In reality is we're going to have to use less. I probably spoke for over my 5 minutes, so I'm going to hand it back over to Maurice.
Thank you very much, Mark. Really appreciate your leadership, and the picture that you painted is a picture that we see time and time and time again across the Western US, and I'm sure in many other parts of the world. We want to go next to another farmer, Brett Baker. Brett is from California's Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. That delta is a critical hub for California's water infrastructure. It's also a vibrant farming region and a vital ecosystem. Now, like other irrigators in the region, Brett, you have to report your water use. And as an attorney, you also help other farmers and water districts in that process. Could you give us an idea of the status of farmers using OpenET to report their water use to the state of California, and how farmers are reacting to this new compliance system that uses OpenET? Oh, after the video.
Is this thing on? Is this on? Yeah. We have been farming on this piece of dirt since the 1850s, and we were proud stewards of this land. As a farmer by nature, you're an environmentalist. Your well-being is tied to the well-being of the plants and wildlife that depend on the same resources that you do.
The Delta is 750,000 acres, roughly the size of the state of Rhode Island, the largest estuary on the west coast of the North and South Hemisphere. The last major drought, it became abundantly clear that we didn't have sufficient data to make critical decisions about how to manage in shortage circumstances.
Measuring water in the Delta has been a fool's errand. Measuring just the applied water or diverted water doesn't give you the full picture.
Instead of putting a meter on every diversion, it just made sense to look at something that was less invasive, less expensive. So OpenET is a game changer for the Delta because it will give us real-time information that has a high degree of credibility.
OpenET, it gives us a bird's eye view of what's actually going on the ground in real time. It provides an opportunity to get more relevant data. There will be ways to use this information going forward that will benefit everybody, not just in the state of California, but I believe throughout the Western United States and beyond.
Excellent. So I'm that fool, and that's been my errand for the last decade or so. First, before we get to that, I want to tell you a little bit about where I come from and why our hydrology and our situation makes for a perfect marriage between OpenET and Delta water users. So the 750,000 acres Michael George, our Delta Water Master, was talking about is a statutorily defined region in the state of California, the Sacramento River Delta. And I didn't convert that to hectares. It's about 1,000 square miles. And the majority of that are islands and tracts. And they were reclaimed about the time began being reclaimed about the time California began statehood and the middle of the 1800s, and were largely reclaimed by about 1900. And one of the unique things about our situation as juxtaposed to the rest of our state is our problem isn't water scarcity so much as we generally have too much water. And so we have artificially created drainage systems in our islands, and we discharge water out back into the channel to keep our root zone oxygenated and have opportunity to make productive agriculture or cultivate that land. It was, generally speaking, in a state of nature, a freshwater tidal estuary, marsh, whatever word you prefer. And so in our situation, we cannot store water. We have to get rid of water continually. Our two biggest concerns are floods, and then the rest of the state is concerned about drought in California. So we are continually discharging water back into the channel. When we apply water, it is either percolated back into the groundwater, evaporated by the plant, or discharged back into the channel. So it just makes sense that OpenET and the relevant measure for our water use in the Delta is consumptive use for those reasons. And so in about 2009, we passed a piece of legislation in the state of California called the Delta Reform Act, which required for the first time that Delta water users meter or report their water use. So we did this using an equation and localized weather data. We put in some weather stations and we began reporting our water use based on calculation. And throughout that period of time, I would continually, find myself at my wit's end. We installed some water meters, some physical measuring devices, which are extremely costly, difficult to maintain. And worst of all, they give you bad data and they lose a lot of data. So I would constantly find myself on the side of the levee, replacing a battery or getting a sensor to work and looking up and saying, someone help me, please. And in about 2019, OpenET showed up and Michael George introduced us, and we started talking about developing and using the program to report and measure water use in the Delta. And so we have embarked on an effort to build an API. We built an app for that, basically, right? So we've used ArcGIS, mapped out our places of use, corresponded to a water right, a point of diversion, an identifier. And so our app will take that spatial data, query OpenET, get the data back for us, and we'll have an auto-populator filled out report. So we can get this data back to the regulators and the water system managers in our state. One other thing about the Delta that I should have mentioned at the very beginning is there are two large diversions in our Delta. The two largest diversions are the state and Central Valley water projects. We have the federal government and the state government both taking water out of the Delta, and they rely on, as I said, consumptive use. They've used a model that they created in the 50s and 60s when the projects came online to calculate Delta consumptive use, net Delta outflow index, or in net Delta island consumptive use. And that algorithm has remained largely unchanged since the 50s and 60s. It has been updated. There are a few improvements that have been made, but by and large, it's pretty rudimentary. And just for example, if we have measured rainfall at Fire Station 4 in Stockton, we consider that it rained in the entire Delta, and that will cancel out the consumptive use for 4 days thereafter. Any measurable rainfall. So anyhow, it's not a very good equation. So we're excited about this opportunity. It does present us an ability to give uniform data to the regulators and folks operating the system, and more timely data. And I think that those two things coupled make that increase the value, the utility of that data extremely, because currently we were looking at water under the bridge. We were reporting last year's data at best. So we've had some legislative changes. We're going to change our reporting period from an annual year to our water year, which is September 30th to October 1st every year. And we're going to be able to give more timely, relevant data to the folks making decisions on how that system's operated. And I'm hopeful that that will not only allow for the continued productivity of my region and my water users and my clients and my family's farm, but also improve the health of the ecosystem and allow for better management of the system overall, because we'll have more informed decisions. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Brett. It's been a real treat to work with you and the other Delta water agencies, and it's great to hear the story from your side of the platform.
Since I have you all here, I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you, and it's a real honor to be here. And yeah, fellow water warriors, I really appreciate that opportunity. I want to take the moment to say that. Thank you.
Aaron. Another place that OpenET is being used is in the high elevation valleys of the U.S. state of Colorado. It's a very different setting from California's Delta region. And we would like to show you a video of a rancher from Colorado.
My name is Paul Boucher. I'm a rancher just outside of Kremlin, Colorado. We run a cow-calf operation, raise hay, irrigate out of 3 different water resources. We also operate a guided fly fishing business to help supplement income and work the ranch as a family. Water to our operation means everything. We rolled through the drought of the early 2000s in the headwaters, learned some lessons there, which is largely why my family and my neighbors are as engaged as we are with water. We are truth testing different forms of measuring water used for irrigation on high altitude perennials. We are studying the recovery of those crops after having different forms of treatment to them, the full season curtailment, and then a split season where the producer was allowed to irrigate until June 15th and then required to shut off for the remainder of the season. I'm excited to continue to learn about the information and data gathered by OpenET. I'm excited to truth test that against many of the other forms and mechanisms that we have working. With OpenET, it completely changes our ability to understand what's going on within our fields. Water is the lifeblood of the West, and we have to figure out how to do more or the same with less. The more that we have the science and the data, the more that we'll be able to make good decisions.
Now with us today, we have Aaron Derwingson, who is a water project manager for the Nature Conservancy, and he's been working with Paul Boucher, who you saw in the video, and a number of other ranchers in Colorado. Now, Aaron, you've been working with these ranchers and the university partners to determine how ranchers in Colorado can conserve water while minimizing impacts on their pastures' health and their long-term yield and economic survival. Could you tell us a little bit about this study to incorporate and why it's important to Colorado and beyond, and how OpenET is helping?
Yeah, thanks, Maurice, and thanks everybody for being here and for the opportunity to share our story. And Paul couldn't be here, but he sends his greetings, and y'all are stuck with me. But I think in terms of the importance, water scarcity is a huge issue for Colorado. It's a huge issue for the other 6 states and the country of Mexico that share in the resource. 40 million people, some 5 million acres of irrigated ag lands, and then a vast and interconnected ecosystem, all at incredible risk right now because the Colorado River is tanking. If you haven't seen the news in the last week, really, it's in a very, very precipitous place. Flows have dropped some 20% since 2000, and they're forecasted to decline another 10 to 40% by 2050. The reservoirs in the basin have plummeted to dangerously low levels. They're as low as they've ever been since they were first being filled. And the recent estimate is that they need to cut back 2 to 4 million acre feet in the basin just to stabilize the system where it's at now. I think this is a savvy crowd, right? So an acre foot is about how much water you need for 2 average households for a year. Cutting back 2 to 4 million acre feet in the basin is a massive amount of water. The whole basin uses about 12.5 million acre feet right now. And so it's a monumental task, and it's going to affect everything from food production that Paul thinks about, to hydropower, to water availability to cities, to river flows for endangered fish and other wildlife that depend on those riparian ecosystems. And so we've got our work cut out for us, and the work with ag is especially important, right? Ag in the basin, like most water scarce regions is the bulk of the water use. It's about 80 to 85% of the use in the basin for growing food and fiber. And so any solution is going to significantly involve ag. And that's sort of where the easy part ends, right? And what that solution needs to look like is the real challenge and opportunity that we're facing, right? Again, because it's so interconnected with food, with local and regional economies, and for us, stream flows and wildlife habitat. And in a place like Colorado, and what you saw where Paul and his neighbors ranch, wildlife habitat and irrigated ag are really intertwined. And so we have to be really thoughtful about what that reduction looks like in ag. And that's really the work that I do at TNC, that we do with Paul and others, is to tackle that challenge, right? Build partners with ag water users, with the folks that are managing that resource day in, day out, and have that knowledge, combine it with resources from universities and other partners, and develop, test, and then share these, creative water conservation strategies that can help us get by in a water limited system, but do it in a way that allows us to thrive and allows for productive ag and allows for healthy communities and a healthy environment. And then over the last 10 years, we've been doing dozens of different experiments, small scale, large scale, working with different partners. But the study that Paul mentioned that we're doing with OpenET and others, it's really, I think, probably our most ambitious, or certainly our most comprehensive effort to date, to really think about how do we tackle all of those interrelated issues around reducing ag water use. It's a 4-year study. It's set up as a side-by-side comparison where we have the treatment fields that Paul mentioned that have some form of reduced irrigation, and then reference fields that get, business as usual. And between the two, we're comparing water use and water savings, forage quality, forage quantity, agronomics, wildlife habitat, impact on stream flows, really trying to get that comprehensive picture of what does this mean for each individual parcel, the whole community, and the river itself. Our kind of 3 main questions are, how can we measure water use accurately and at scale, which is where OpenET comes in. And then what are the agronomic impacts of reduced water use, and how can we help producers make informed decisions about how to manage this increasingly limited resource? And then for the basin and for the Nature Conservancy, we want to better understand, how does that water conservation impact wildlife habitat and river flows? And really, this kind of comprehensive research study, it's only possible thanks to all the partners involved. Paul's really one of the champions of the project, but he's got 9 other families that he's recruited to join in this effort. They've put about 1,200 acres of land into the program, allowed researchers from 3 different universities to crawl all over the field and measure the grass and put equipment in. And then those partners themselves that are doing the research and providing the data. And OpenET is just really a core component of this work to understand water use, right? If we didn't have OpenET and we couldn't create these pictures like this, we'd be left with sort of the traditional options, which rely very heavily on assumptions. If you were going to go through Colorado right now and estimate water use on these fields, you would basically you'd be guessing. You'd be doing informed guessing and well-reasoned guessing, but you'd be guessing. You'd be guessing at how much water they divert. You'd be guessing at what they efficiency is to get it to the field, the efficiency it gets applied with, and you'd be guessing at what the crops use, okay? And if we wanted an alternative that wasn't OpenET, we'd be out there doing a whole water balance, right? We would be putting tons of equipment on these fields, all the way down in the soil, measuring all the water applied, where it goes back to the river in 50 different locations. And I know a lot of ranchers, but I don't know anyone who wants to sign up for that level of instrumentation on their field, right? And so the ability to have something like OpenET that lets us get those estimates at scale, cost effectively, it's huge, right? And I think this picture shows, it shows the results from our fields, right? And shows the water use compared to previous years, right? And so we have the treatment fields that you can see in red. That's where the water use is lower. And you can see the reference field there in blue, right? And so that gives us a very visual piece. But I think the other really important part that we've learned in this project is how this can build trust in the tool from our ag partners, right? Because they can look at that field and they can align what they see with what they know. And a quick story you can see on that, that top treatment one where it says T2, you can see a little bit of blue bleeding into the red, right? And what happened is that field wasn't supposed to get irrigated. but because of changes in management that come along with it, one of the ditches blew out and it spread a bunch of water onto the field that wasn't supposed to get it. And you can see that clearly, right? So you can see this is, maybe happened for 2-3 weeks on there. And that lets Paul and his neighbors again see like, well, hey, this is what I know from my management, and it aligns with what I'm seeing. And it builds more trust in the tool than, seeing some, different engineering spreadsheets. I think the last thing I want to say is the importance of getting to scale, because this project matters for this part of the Colorado River. It matters for this community in Kremling. But if we don't figure out how to tackle this problem at the whole scale of the basin, then that's where we're really lost and where the real opportunity is, right? And in the basin, we basically have a massive water management challenge, right? And the old saying, you can't manage what you can't measure. And this is going to be, I think, one of the most important tools we have to do that measurement at scale that's going to allow for that improved water management. And then success is going to take that tool coming together with folks like Paul and his neighbors, other ag leaders, like Mark and Brett, that are willing to experiment and try something new with public funding, with philanthropy. All that's going to have to come together for a path to make change at a scale for places like the Colorado River Basin. But really excited to share this story because I think this is exactly how we start and where we grow from. Thanks, Maurice.
Yeah, Aaron, very glad that you could be here. We're glad to have Paul on the video, but I think the combination of you, the university groups, and the farmers is exactly the kind of, illustrates exactly the kind of collaboration that is going to help us address this repeated challenge. Now, OpenET has certainly been developed with irrigated agriculture in mind, but it also has applications beyond irrigated agriculture. So I want to introduce Elvy Barton. Elvy works with the Salt River Project and is a forest, helps to guide their forest management. And first we have a video that describes a little bit about the setting where Elvy works.
We are in the East Clear Creek watershed. This is one of our most at-risk watersheds because our dam here is completely surrounded by ponderosa pine forest that are in an unhealthy state. With increasing temperatures, we're having increasing variability with droughts, and unhealthy forest has fuel for large catastrophic wildfires. So we adopted a 2035 goal to support 500,000 acres of forest thinning. Now, this is unprecedented since no utility in the United States has taken on a forest health goal. It's going to take a lot of science and tech and data. And so when we begin our forest thinning projects, the trees will become more drought tolerant. OpenET will help us have data to inform how our forest thinning projects are reacting to those climate change impacts that we're seeing today.
Elvy, the Salt River Project provides water and energy to 2.5 million people in the greater Phoenix metropolitan area in Arizona. Now, I was wondering if you could drill down a little bit and tell us a little bit about how OpenET is helping you understand the connections between forest health and how you are using this data.
Thank you, Maurice. And thank you everyone for being here in person and online. So as Maurice mentioned, I work for the Salt River Project, which is a U.S. Bureau of Reclamation project. Our organization manages and operates 7 dams and reservoirs and delivers water to 2.5 million residents. Now, the water that we deliver every day derives from an 8.3 million acres on 3 different watersheds. And those watersheds are at high risk for catastrophic wildfire due to lack of management of our forest and overgrowth. So SRP, my organization, is engaged with a lot of partners to reduce the dense material in our forest through forest thinning projects. And by reducing the dense vegetation, you also reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfire and the potential impacts that it not only has on our water supplies, the water quality, but also the water infrastructure that we use to deliver the water. Now, one of the questions I always get asked about forest management projects is, can you quantify the water benefits associated with forest thinning projects? And now with OpenET, we can. So we know that OpenET has the view data for the Western United States, and you can zoom in to any location. And the first place I look at is the projects that we are planning on operating on. This gives us at least the baseline conditions related to evapotranspiration that we can measure on the ground. The second way I use the OpenET is that when projects are actually implemented on the ground, we can now compare the thinned version of the forest to its previous existing conditions, and you can measure the amount of ET change that has happened between the baseline conditions and the treated conditions. And then the third way that I use OpenET data is that now I can monitor over long term. I can look from year to year and look at the ET changes that have occurred over those years. I can also look at how the vegetation is regrowing and how that also impacts the changes in evapotranspiration. So now that I have those three different ways of using OpenET data, I also have a way to quantify how my forest treatments are going to be impacting the water budget, which really is very helpful for not only regulatory agencies, but when we are also working with our partners and applying for grants, I now have a tool that I can use that actually measures quantified water benefits and not just making assumptions and guesses at what the water benefits really are. So this has been a really life-changing definite tool in order for us to look at landscape scale restoration and how it does impact the different water budgets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elvy. And I'm convinced that your experiences there in the forest of Northern Arizona are going to be valuable in other places and across the world. After living through fires and smoke in New Mexico this year, I'm especially attuned to the issues of forest management and the new challenges that climate change is forcing us to deal with there. Now, we are mostly have been working in the United States, but we are certainly beginning to explore what OpenET might provide in other places. And beginning that exploration, I want to introduce Anderson Ruhoff. Now, Anderson has actually been a very important member of our technical team, even though he sits in Brazil. He and his team have been instrumental in programming one of the algorithms, one of the ET estimation methods into the platform. And I know Anderson is also interested in applying OpenET in Brazil. And so Anderson, thank you for all your support and your help. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit about how your interest in expanding OpenET and how you see it being used in Brazil.
Morning. Thanks for the introduction, Maurice. It's honored to be here. And as Maurice told, I'm from Brazil. In 2019, I was in the US, and I had the opportunity to meet Gabriel, Robin, Maurice, and other OpenET members. And since then, I'm working with them to program some of the models, and so they are using in the US, but we are also using some of the models in Brazil. So Brazil, as you know, is one of the largest crop producers in the world. Is investing a lot in technology to increase productivity. And there is a lot of efforts as well from the Brazilian Water Agency to monitor agriculture. But there are also several issues. And one of the issues is that agriculture and cropland is expanding towards the Amazon. And it's causing some changes in a hydrological cycle. As you know, so large parts of Brazil have 4, 5, 6 months of a dry season, so it's a less reduced, it's a reduced precipitation rates, and basically there are large areas in Brazil with irrigation, and basically when the cropland expands towards the rainforest or when deforestation happens, what is basically happening is that that we see some changes in evapotranspiration rates. Basically, it reduces around 1 to 1.5 millimeter per day during the dry season. it may isn't that much, 1 millimeter, but if you accumulate this amount over millions of square kilometers and during 6 months, for instance, it is a lot, and it's causing some reduction in water availability, water precipitation that is affecting not only the cropland areas, but also large areas in the country that produces energy based on hydropower and urban supply. And in addition, we are also seeing drought occurrences and drought intensification in Brazil, even with vast reserves of fresh water. So basically, we are using OpenET models to track the impacts of deforestation on the water cycle, and of course, to monitor water use in agriculture. And OpenET data is not only needed in the US, but also abroad in countries where we see cropland expansion and deforestation. And it's a great tool to get a sense or to monitor how the hydrological cycle is evolving. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Anderson, and thank you all the panelists. It is inspiring to hear your stories, and it's very exciting to see the merger of a technology building on the work of decades of hundreds, if not thousands of people and satellite imagery processing, but bringing that to the ground in special places to solve the unique local issues. So with that, we have the rest of the time allotted to questions and answers. And so we will take questions from the audience here and online. If you are online, you can enter your questions in the chat on the platform. I've got a word here that I can't read that I wrote down, but in the digital platform, and we will be monitoring that. And I think we have one questioner who's already established her position in the line. So
thank you all for the panel. I'm Tanya Trujillo from the Department of the Interior in the US, and I really did appreciate all of the case studies. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for highlighting the drought issues that we are dealing with, not only in the Colorado River Basin, which are severe, but also in California, Oregon, New Mexico, all around the rest right now is a huge challenge for us. My question is relating to the satellite data. And I'm wondering if the USGS folks and the NASA folks can tell us, is this from the Landsat program? And even if it is or isn't, I wanted to just say congratulations to the Landsat program, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary of partnership between NASA and USGS. And it's great to have that coordination and the Earth observation images that the program provides. So thank you all.
yes, thank you for the question. And I did want to emphasize that it's a kind of a unique opportunity to have some of the technical team and the users in the room. And so questions of any of that nature are very much welcome. So
yeah,
Dr. Sanay.
I can quickly address that. Actually, it wasn't my slide. I just forgot to mention it, but it's a USGS Landsat, it's a USGS NASA partnership, of course, but also we use other satellites from European satellites, and also in partnership with Japanese. But the workhorse is Landsat because it has a unique band. The thermal band is only available with Landsat at a field scale. But also we use other satellites, also weather data sets coming from other sources. Landsat, 50 years.
Thank you. I'll do that here.
Thank you very much. No, very, very interesting session. Katrin Ehlert, World Meteorological Organization. I just have a follow-up question to this. Like, given that the satellites you use, how far does the data go back? And are you planning on integrating this also, informing the US Drought Monitor, or yeah, any thoughts about that? Thanks.
Gabriel, Alberto, either of you want to respond to that?
So currently we have 6 years of data, but because we use Landsat, we can go back to 1985 potentially if there's.
Anderson, you have something you want to respond?
Yeah, and I would also add that so for deforestation, we are using Landsat data since 1985. So the 50 years of Landsat are unbelievable good to monitor that. Yeah.
There was another part of your question?
Right, there are other actual products because Landsat is a little bit expensive to process for the whole corners or for the world. But there are other products like MODIS-based products that are available, and the drought monitor has access to them. Some of the products actually like Quick Dry comes out of the USGS AROS as well. So there are a lot of some satellite products that are being incorporated with the drought monitor. But Landsat is going to take a little bit of a while because just computational is a little bit expensive.
Here you go.
Online, I'm just going to give them a chance to. There's actually a couple questions about geography. Is OpenET available outside of the US? Is it available in African countries? So I think we should just clarify geography really quick.
You want to respond to that?
Yeah, so quick answer is it's currently just in the 17 Western states. We certainly see value in it showing up in other places. And of course, we already have partners on the team who'd like to see it in their own home countries. We did just launch last October. And so I will say that right now we're really focused on maintaining reliability, providing user support, making sure that we do our homework and our due diligence in the geography where we just made it available. And we're capacity limited, but that doesn't reduce our interest. And I think a key component of international expansion eventually is going to be, identifying the right partners in any region into which OpenET is expanding into, that can take a leadership role in sort of identifying the right technical team to partner with there, scoping out and sort of doing a landscape analysis, initial steps, building partnerships, et cetera. So I think that's going to be a key first step in any place of interest that wants to see OpenET expanded. So I'll leave it there for now and happy to pass back that way.
Yeah, just adding a little bit to that. I think from the very beginning, as we began to build OpenET, a real focus was focusing on the end users and the needs and making sure that the platform, both the way the data is provided and the interface worked for the people who are going to be needing it. And so for other areas, we're very much interested in learning about people and users who will need this data, how they see it being used, and we can begin building those relationships and building the capacity to potentially expand the platform. Functionally, the platform is very much applicable in other parts of the world. There are some limitations, some significant limitations. Cloud cover and extended cloud cover is one of the sort of notable limitations. Also, ground-based meteorological data will be needed, ideally, automatically accessible. Meteorological data is an important component of making those estimates, drawing down the accuracy or narrowing down the accuracy bands on those estimates. So for those who see needs, very interested in hearing about how you see it being used potentially in your region. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Ntayo Alamayo. I really thank the panelists. That was really excellent, insightful. Yeah, is it working? It's yeah, okay. Okay, good. Yeah, so this is really excellent. I mean, Mark, we kind of talk the same language. I have developed Alfalfa suitability mapping for Ethiopia, basically to assess where you can grow alfalfa, how climate change actually affect the production. And also I try to see the supplementary irrigation requirements if there is no rainfall. So, so since you are representing a farmer organization, how would be the uptake rates from a farmer who are not really educated? So that's one question. The second thing also, I just want to really thank the USGS team, Gabriel and his team. We're actually upscaling the same technology. We have received the open source code to replicate this in Ethiopia as a part of the Africa. So this is really great opportunity. And of course, we do also have our partner, I can see TES, also trying to scale up how we could also, integrate from the community use perspective. And also we had some kind of conversation with myself and Tess from the foundation, how community of practice could actually engage. Because when you are dealing with small scale farmer, they also have a traditional way of controlling, using resource management, especially on the water. So we're also trying to integrate that. Hopefully on the next year, WWW, we will be sitting there and also sharing our experience. But yeah, this is really excellent. And thank you for the USGS team. They have been really great in terms of sharing the knowledge they have really acquired. Yeah, happy also to engage one-on-one, Mark, afterward. Thanks.
It's great to hear one of our major hopes is happening and the news and the information is getting around the world. Mark, did you want to respond to his question?
The question was, how do we get farmers and ranchers to actually implement and use it? Yeah. First of all, we're going to be down at the OpenET booth after this. We have a break. Come on down. We'd love to talk to you or even go out for coffee to have a conversation later. Great question. So I have a lot of grace with my farmers and ranchers because I am a farmer and rancher, but we all know in this room is that probably like we're water nerds. Things are changing. We're going to have to change with practice. So like I said, we need to make sure they're comfortable with the information, make sure they can ground truth it. But reality says we're going to have to do more with less. And we're going to have to push our farmers and ranchers with grace to get there. It's going to be difficult, honestly. We'll sit down and have more conversations, but we got to figure out how to do more with less.
Seen your hand a few times.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My name is Natalia. I'm a Rotary Peace Fellow. And my question is how this technology can be used to assess cover crops. There are ones like purslane, which are really quite waxy. They're eaten in the Mediterranean, and they can help retain soil moisture. So is it already being used in this way? And how are cover crops usually considered by farmers? How would the technology help them consider them? And again, look up purslane. It's really cool. Like, I don't work in anything related to developing this, but I'm just a bit of a nerd and I grew up in the Mediterranean originally, so.
Thank you. Either of you want to address that? Did you say you don't?
Well, no, I mean, I don't know if this is exactly what you're looking for. We cultivate pears, right? That's our target crop, but purslane actually grows in the rows in between the pears. The nice thing about this is this technology is it's getting data, that raster view that they showed you there. That's 30 by 30 meter pixel. It's a quarter of an acre. So it's encompassing all that evaporative transpiration, all that vegetative growth in that area. So yeah, those things are being captured. And when we talk about water rights, which Maurice promised to stop me if I use the word res judicata or collateral estoppel or anything like that. But no, when we talk about water rights, yeah, you're entitled, or your entitlement encompasses everything within the four corners of your property. So yeah, we want to try and capture all the water that's being used, and this technology does that.
I can add just one thing, the method doesn't require knowledge about the crop, the plant. It doesn't care about that. So as long as it uses water. So the most important, if you use water, there will be a satellite signal knowing how much water is being used. And then again, put that in the equation. So no need to know what kind of crop or plant is growing, but whether it uses water or not is the most important thing.
Hi. Thank you for that presentation. Really exciting. I'm Veena Srinivasan. I work in India. We have a similar product called the Jaltol plugin, which we've been trying to do what you've been doing much more effectively. Where we've struggled is two things. One is we don't have as much flux tower data, in fact, none in the public domain, which is one big problem. But the second problem is uncertainty. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the uncertainty bars, because in the absence of good public data, the bars are sometimes greater than the total runoff or the total amount of change that farmers can make. And so one of the big struggles with us wrestling with the ETB is just to try and get the water balances to close, which they often don't. Since you've tried to go to other low data environments, I was wondering if you could speak about uncertainty and what could be done to reduce that. I'd also like to say we'd love to partner. We've got the user and use case side of it figured out. We've just not got the technical side of it figured out.
Yeah, I can say, understand you can add to that or anybody. So yeah, there is always uncertainty. So it's a model, it's an estimate. And that varies depending on whether the area is using more water, then the uncertainty is lower. But if it's just sparsely vegetated and it's not using much water, then the uncertainty is higher. So in over-irrigated areas, the uncertainty is very low. So it's very accurate. But low vegetation areas, because the amount of water being used is already low, so the relative accuracy is lower. But overall, we're interested in monitoring irrigated lands, and probably the accuracy is greater than 80%. So we're talking about an accuracy 80 to 90% at a seasonal scale, over irrigated agriculture, which is pretty good compared to what we had in the past, plus or minus 50% before. Now we're plus or minus 20, 15%. Anybody understand here?
One interesting point is when you use one or more models, like 3, 4, or 6 models as OpenET, you can also have a sense of the uncertainty, and so you can see in the shaded areas how good is your data. And what we are seeing is basically when you combine more models, so you reduce uncertainty. It's using an average or some other kind of model combination. It usually produces better quality of data. And I also suppose that your situation in India is quite similar as in Brazil. So we don't have like a 200 flux towers in Brazil, but we have a 35, around 45. It's not publicly available, but it's basically it's building a network with other researchers, and that's the beauty of OpenET: create connections and put all research scientists, water users, policymakers together to produce better data.
This is a little bit off topic slightly, but I think it's an interesting question. Someone is asking, do you see the tool of OpenET in an extension to also inform temporal spatial carbon sequestration? So I don't know.
I suppose it is possible. So it's not the goal of the OpenET, and but so when plants use water or release water to the atmosphere, they also are capturing CO2. So I think if you add some other models, I think it would be possible, but it's not a goal for the OpenET now. But I would say with more modeling, it would be.
Repeatedly here, but I'm sure I'm missing some.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. I have 2 questions. One is, when I hear that you have 4,000 acres, big farms, what's the minimum size of the plot you can manage? Is it something that we can imagine to use for small-scale farmers? And the second question is, again, for Mr. Owens on Oregon. Did you consider looking at the rainfall and the evapotranspiration, because now that you have a very precise evapotranspiration, you can also see how much rain was falling there. And if there's more rain than evapotranspiration, you have recharge of the aquifer at that place. And that's places where you may wish to change the agricultural method, because you could increase the recharge of the aquifer.
to respond, I can.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a 30-meter pixel. So it depends on the satellite data. So really our accuracy, the spatial accuracy depends on what satellite you use. So with Landsat being, a field scale, so we will be able to monitor about a couple of acres. So it's, the total maybe thousands of acres we're monitoring extent, but if you're interested in an individual, we can say an acre, but I would say a couple of acres, 2-3 acres, we will be able to monitor that. If you use other satellites, then they will become a little bit coarser, but with Landsat, it's about a couple of acres.
It's also about practicality. So if you're on a farmer, you're going to look at the scale of what that irrigation system does, what that circle, what that linear, what that wheel line does. And we talked about the 30 by 30 meter, quarter meter, but it's honestly for practicality. If I have one pivot, I'm going to manage that system as a whole. If I have a 40-acre irrigation system, I'm going to manage that. So it's going to go down to what the farmer can do and what he can manage and how he applies water with the scale.
And just responding to the last part of your question on the water balance, groundwater recharge and such, one of the big questions that I hope to get a better sense of is how much water that is applied through irrigation is actually recharging the groundwater. OpenET doesn't give you that number, but previously we were guessing at all those numbers. OpenET does provide a good estimate of the ET, and it gives you that piece of the puzzle and allows better estimation of the amount of water that is then recharging groundwater or going offsite to somewhere else. And so it does help to narrow that analysis.
So knowing we're all water nerds, but OpenET, when I look at that, and I look at my pivot and it shows me what OpenET is, that doesn't mean that's the amount of water I'm actually applying. So like when I talked about when we get together on those Monday mornings, we look at what the crop demand is, which should be correlating with OpenET, but then I take the efficiency of my irrigation system and I have to multiply it by that to understand what I need to apply. So the way we saved water on a project was putting more efficient systems in, and they were normally designed at approximately a normal MESA mid-elevation spray application on a pivot in our area is designed at about 7.2 gallons per acre per minute per day. We took it down to where we designed our system down to about 6.2 gallons per minute. We tried 5.8, but we started getting a reduction of yield. Yes, eventually we're going to have to irrigate to reduction of yield, but that's the type of information we're looking at when we try to design to.
I'll go to the back a little bit since I've been focusing on the front.
Good morning. I'm Zane Marshall, Director of Water Resources for the Southern Nevada Water Authority in Las Vegas. We've been supportive of OpenET, and our congressional representatives have as well. I'm curious what the status of funding is for the program, and is the program at full implementation or development for the current scope? And what is your needs for funding or other resources going forward?
Very much like that question. Thank you.
So so OpenET is now establishing itself as a new nonprofit. So it went from a project that was primarily philanthropically funded with a lot of support also from federal agencies to an independent entity that is now seeking a variety of funding sources, some of which is public, and then also looking to offset any gaps in the public picture with some philanthropic dollars as well. The our attempts at federal authorization are still in the works. We haven't seen that. We've seen a bill pass the House, but not the Senate at this point. And so, it's unclear how that's going to play out over the next couple of months and through the election cycle. And so we're at this point seeing a healthy amount of support from states, not as much yet from the federal government. And we also got some good transition funding from some philanthropic sources. I would say we are fully funded for our current scope through the end of a year, and then really needing some additional sources of funding to keep going into the next couple of years. And one thing that we're really, as I mentioned earlier, with regards to the international question, focused on is being sure that when others hear these stories and momentum starts to build around applications for this tool, that we have the team capacity to respond to that and to provide the levels of user support and partnership that are needed in order to make sure this tool is getting used and that scaling starts to actually happen. So there's that aspect. There's making sure that the science continues to evolve and this continues to represent best available science in terms of the integrity of the data that's being put out there, that the ground truthing efforts can continue to happen so that we build the trust that we need in all those communities. So there's a lot of work still to do, even though the tool has been launched, even in the 17 Western states that it's currently sitting in. So really appreciate the question. I hope we're successful in this fundraising effort of ours, because there's a lot of good that can come from it. So thanks.
And I will add a little bit to that. In my closing, I would plan to acknowledge the incredible generosity of a number of funders. We have been supported over the past 7 years by a group of foundations that have contributed to the tune of $9 to $10 million, according to how you count it, to support the team in the building of the platform. That, of course, builds on billions of dollars of investment by the U.S. federal government and other entities in research, getting to the point where we can actually program these algorithms and have confidence in them. But very much want to thank those partners for support. To the point of going forward, we're a nonprofit venture. We hope to fund OpenET, the basic functionality of OpenET, in a way that continues to provide the data to individual users and small users free of charge. At some point, there could be a volume point where we begin to charge for some of the data, for large volumes of data. But it's a nonprofit venture. Our intent is to provide OpenET information to users of all types, so that we're all looking at the same data, solving water issues. And to do that, we're certainly going to need funding. We have funding for the immediate future, but frankly, only a few months out, we begin to see question marks, and very much looking to fill those gaps with state and federal funding to some extent, but also looking for other funding sources.
Hi, thank you. My name is Callie Stinson. I'm here with Water Foundry, which is a consultancy specializing in strategy and technology innovation. First of all, thank you for an outstanding panel, and congratulations to the organizers. This is really not only interesting, but I think a breath of fresh air in terms of perspective. So well done on that. My question is about partnerships, in particular technology partnerships. This is a relatively new endeavor. It's very exciting. It's an impressive tool. We also know that this is an increasingly crowded landscape, and I'm curious how you're thinking about collaboration opportunities with other, whether it be tools or other technology providers, to help kind of amplify the impact of your solution and reach more people.
I'm sure many of us have comments to make on that. I'll start a little and have Robin add, and others on the team can add to that. But it has been an amazing and exceptionally challenging partnership and collaboration in getting to this point. The issues surrounding intellectual property, ownership of the software, contributions of software from different sources, that in itself is a whole arena that water wonks like me are not so familiar with, but are quickly having to get up to speed with and hire the right expertise to support that. Another issue that is frankly quite challenging is the demand for good software application talent, and we have just some amazing talent on the team, and they are doing great work. They believe in their work. They also have lots of job opportunities, and so keeping that team together and keeping that expertise is a continuing challenge, and something that certainly weighs heavily on my mind. I'll pass it to Robin.
Yeah, I just wanted to that was a good view on the internal aspect of that. I think I wanted to be sure that we said again, or had that chance to say again, the point that I think Alberto made about the development of the application programming interface, because the whole, drive behind that was to make sure that OpenET was not just something that individuals could go look at and explore, but that other tools could link into and then build from, right? And so we haven't yet publicly released it, but we do have a working group of API users, and they range from consultants to state agency staff to ag tech firms, and they've all been testing that API and providing feedback, and at the same time, starting to build some momentum around integration into irrigation, farm and ranch management tools, for example. Other water accounting systems is another use case that we didn't actually talk about today, but that's been integrated into programs like that for water management districts across California and elsewhere. And so it's certainly another really big thrust of ours, is to make sure that people can continue to innovate on top of what we've built here, and that other software programs and other tools can be built on top of it. And that's part of the support that I was speaking to, wanting to be sure that we have funding to support that team to continue to partner with those consultants and others that are using the tool and building from it. And the API we've heard, I just have to give credit to Alberto and Will and others who aren't here. A lot of folks in that API user group have really complimented them on what an efficient and amazing back end they've built into that, and how easy it is to use and integrate. So compliments to that part of the team.
I think we have time for one more question. And I don't really know how to be fair.
Thank you so much. My name is Imran Sajid, and I'm a consultant for water management in South and Central Asia, and also a fresh PhD graduate from Bonn University. So my question is that, do you have plan in future to expand this platform beyond ET for water accounting or agriculture water management? Because I completely agree with you that ET is the core component of water balance in agriculture. So and it's really easy to estimate other components like potential evapotranspiration, percolation, runoff, and other components. So is there any plan to go beyond this in future? And also, which method do you use to estimate ET? Is it surface energy balance, or do you use other methods as well? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'll provide a brief early answer, and then Gabriel or others can respond to the methods. So currently, the ET is provided wall to wall. All of the land surface estimates are provided. So that's forest lands, range lands. The estimates aren't very good in urban areas where there are a lot of other heat sources, a lot of extraneous heat sources. And so that becomes complicated in urban areas. But for rural areas, forest management and rangeland management are certainly part of the capability of OpenET. The science behind that and the accuracy assessments aren't quite as well developed as they are for irrigated agriculture, but we anticipate a lot of work to happen on that quite rapidly now that OpenET is there and provides that data to other researchers who can begin to narrow down those accuracy bands in those landscapes. Geographically speaking, we are beginning some work to expand to some other parts of the United States and to extreme northwestern Mexico. We have some funding to support that expansion. We do, as Robin indicated, we're excited about expanding into other parts of the world, supporting others to build on the basic platform and engaging expertise from other places to do that. We will have to secure the funding and have the support to do that, but very much look forward to do that in the coming years.
I'll pass it to Gabriel to speak to the methodologies, but also in case you were asking about other variables being available through the platform, NDVI is already there. And we also have potential ET available as well. So if you're wanting to understand, changes in ET that are from weather as opposed to land use practices, you can do that by looking at the ratio between potential and actual ET. We are working on adding effective precipitation, although I hesitate to put any kind of timeline on that because it's a really tough nut to crack as far as I understand. But not yet having plans around, recharge or other aspects of the water budget being added in, really focusing on getting the ET piece right and adding the other data around that to help folks understand the consumptive use of applied water, right? So that's why we're wanting to be able to add an effective precip. And then I'll let you speak.
So we have 6 models, and 4 of them are fully pretty much energy balanced, and 2 of them are using the NDVI based, or kind of a combination of NDVI and thermal. So, but mainly because of just the thermal data and the sensitivity of the thermal data to water use, we're using a surface energy balance. So I think I can add also whether this water counting. I think Anderson was telling me how he's using ET and combined with precipitation data, which is globally available now, how people are planning to build water accounting for larger basins once we have the different components. If you want to say something about that, but yeah, okay. Yeah, but yeah, the data is available.
So we are at time. I do want to emphasize, as Mark indicated earlier, we do have a booth that is diagonally across, kind of in the middle of the building on the far wall. And a number of us will be moving over there after this. What's that? It's right here on this floor, I think. We'll be moving over there, and we'll be there. Different ones of us will be there through the week. So very much welcome you coming over either now to have some further conversations or during the week. Most importantly, encourage you to log into openetdata.org, establish your own account, and look at the data. It is amazing technology and frankly, amazing artwork. The people who built this interface did an amazing job making it easy and smooth, and then behind that, an incredibly fast functioning interface. And if you're like me and you've been just dying for this data for years and years, you will lose yourself in exploring what evapotranspiration is across a landscape, finding unique situations, and improving your understanding of what's happening at a landscape scale. It's a real treat. Thank you so much for your attention here today. Thanks for your interest, and we look forward to expanding our community around ET data and helping to address the challenges that we all face around the world in water scarcity. Thank you very much.